All right, guys. Let's look at the transportation notes. Transportation. I'm of the assumption that is week 4, if I'm not mistaken. That is week 4. Transportation to Australia, 1788 to 1857. 1788 to 1857. From the 1750s or 1750, if I can put it that way, to the 1900s, there were serious debates about the purposes of punishment in England. They wanted to know which type of punishment would be effective to combat or circumvent crime in England. So they were exploring alternatives to imprisonment and executions. Remember that executions have been abandoned due to reformists who wrote and acted widely against executions. So the other option now was imprisonment, but there were not enough prisons by that time to incarcerate the ever exciting or the ever increasing crime and criminality in England. All right. So there were many ideas regarding to or relating to how crime should be combated in order to curb those or jail those who have broken the law. Okay, so the shaming punishments such as the stocks, pillory, and whipping was abandoned. Whipping as in flogging those who have been found guilty or those who are suspected, and pillory is whereby a person was placed in public. It's like this thing of a plank. There's a plank, a big plank like this. There's a position for the. I know you've seen it. There's a position for a head and the arms. So you just go like this. You are just like this, and then it's on the head and your arms, and then you are standing. You are then subjected to public scrutiny. It was a shaming kind of punishment. So you were not being hanged, but you'll be there. If you are in town, you are in town, and everyone who's passing by will be looking at you. That here is this guy who has committed crime. So those ones they've been abandoned. So as we've been saying and discussing, few people were hanged, and there were very fewer public executions, of which the later, the public executions or the hangings, they stopped in 1868. So the final person or the last person was executed in public or in prison, was executed in prison was in 1868 for the case of England. Okay, so for the case of France, as we've been discussing, it was the last person to be publicly executed was Damiens in 1837, March 1837, if I'm not mistaken. So now for the first half of the 18th, for March, apologies, sorry for that, for much of the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century, so transportation was a common punishment. So transportation was a less extreme punitive measure than the laws which are under the bloody codes. But also it bore some consequences for criminals that was more severe than a fine, as there were no proper prisons. Okay, so in during the transportation system, there was no proper prisons at all. So if you are being transported to Australia, Australia is an island, or where if you are being transported to New Zealand, there's no way you can come back. There's no way that you can come back. You cannot escape through the sea or anywhere. So that is a prison in itself. But there were no proper prisons where people were being incarcerated there. Just that you are being transported away from home. So automatically that was punishment. Okay. So firstly, before they were sent to Australia, the prisoners or the convicts were first transported to America from 1717. So after the USA gained independence in 1776, they were then transported to Australia. Okay, so it started with transportation to the US, United States, and after United States gained independence, then the convicts were transported to Australia. Okay, so there were advantages for transportation. Okay, one of them was that it was believed that crimes committed by a criminal class, so removing them would result into the decline or the decrease in the percentages of crime. So the belief was that there was a criminal class which was existing in England. So there was a criminal class which was existing in England. So if they were being transported or removing them in the society, that was going to be effective, because there will be a decrease in this criminal class in England. And also they assumed that the transportation is like you are being dispatched to a place of the unknown, which is Australia, will deter crimes. Okay, so if you are being so there was also the one of the advantages of transportation was that if you are being transported to another country, you will fear that you are going to an area that you are not familiar with. Okay, and there was also an advantage that which was stated that the prisoners or the convicts will could rehabilitate. So there was a possibility of rehabilitation of prisoners. Okay, and also one capitalist advantage was that these the prisoners were going to provide labor. We're going to provide labor in order to develop the British colony, of which they were trying to have a sustainable colony in Australia. Okay, It's also prevented martyrdom. Martyrdom is when you are persecuted for not abiding to the rules of the church, or doing against or acting against the church. This is called martyrdom. You are being sacrificed. So it was said that many political prisoners were transported, including Luddites, the Luddites, Luddites, the Luddites. They had to be transported. The Luddites it's a person who's opposed to new technology or ways of working. So it's a person who believes that manual labor provides more work for the people. So when there's machinery, the machinery takes away the jobs of the people. Okay. So those such people were being imprisoned because they were defying the working, the labor employment equity. Okay, and also other people who were transported were included the Chartists. Okay, the Chartists, CHARTISTS, in a plural form, was a working class movement which emerged in 1836 to gain political rights and influence over the working class. And also some people who were transported were the Tolpatli, Metris, Tolpatri, Metris, TOLPUDDLE. It's a city. That is a city in England. You can search it. So it's a city in England. So those were the 6 agricultural members who were convicted in 1834 for swearing a sacred code as a members of the Friendly Society of Agricultural Laborers. So by this time there were the unions and the whatever formation, any other formation which wanted to exercise independence and gain support for the working class was prohibited. Okay, and other people who were transported to Australia were the Irish or the Irish nationalists, those who wanted Ireland to be free from the chains of England, of being or succumbing to the rulership of the English monarchy. So that is why in England right now, when you consider Britain or the United Kingdom as a whole, Ireland is separate now. It's because of these Irish nationalists. Okay, so as I said, that it started in America. The transportation of convicts started in America. So from 1717 there was an increase of people being transported to America. Okay, so in the last 60 years before slavery came into an end, about 40,000 people were transported to the US. Okay, so it was then by slavery. It was then that slavery replaced convict labor. Okay, remember after US gained independence, the slavery was was invented, came into the picture. Slavery came into the picture. That is why on your topic 5, we discuss the Atlantic slave trade. That's whereby they started to collect slaves in West Africa to America. That is why in this place you have the black Americans. They were transported mainly from Africa in the the western parts of Africa. Okay. So we are not talking about slavery, we are coming to slavery. And also remember, while we are still writing this, we are still doing this, please watch the film Rapid Proof Fence. I know some of you have watched it in your leisure time. You can invite your girlfriend or your mate or your friend and watch that's a film, that's movie. It's a very sad one, but please watch it, don't cry. Okay. And so there was a Hulks, as HULKS, not the Hulks, those the heavyweights, not those Hulks, but the Hulks as in a prison ship. There was something which was called the Hulks Acts of 1776. So they disused warships. Convicts were transported. Okay, were transported into these hulks, and they were imprisoned there. There, you'd be transported to a certain hulk, which is just there by the sea, staying there. It's there. It's just there. Then people will be imprisoned on that particular hulk. Okay, so conditions there on the hulks. Remember, they were not new. They were old warships, vessels. So conditions were not good there. They were terrible. There was a death rate. So it was estimated that if there are 3 people, one will die. Okay, from 1779, Australia was promoted as a site of incarceration. So Australia as a site of incarceration, that means that the whole continent, that's the whole Australasia continent, was the prison. So there were no jails which would say this is a building, this is a jail. There was nothing such. But the whole country was a prison because there was no way to escape. So the first fleet of convicts left on 13 May 1787. They reached Port Jackson in Australia on the 26th of January 1788. So there were 11 vessels transporting 1,030 people, including 736 convicts. 736 convicts were also on this ship, and there were also those who just volunteered to go to Australia. Usually the settlers who were sent by the British government or monarchy to develop a colony in Australia. Okay, and these people were transported. It's included a lot of people. For an example, if I can count the numbers, there are numbers here. Those who committed minor thefts, there are about 431. Those for breaking and entering, 93 people. Highway robbery, 71. Stealing cattle or sheep, 41. Robbery with violent, 31. Grand larceny. It's a larceny. Grand larceny is the theft of personal property, which is estimated to be higher than the estimated raids. So there were 9 of those. Those who have received stolen goods, there were 8 of them. So you must watch out if you receive stolen goods and then you know that this thing has been stolen. Even in South Africa right now, you know that is a crime. Okay, so they were also numbered those one, and also for swindling and impersonation, trying to be someone else while you are not, and there were 7 of those. There were also others, 35. There were also those who were arrested of forging documents or banknotes. Okay, and the oldest of these people was an 82 years old male. The youngest who was transported was 9 years old, the child. By the end of the period of transportation, were transported on around 825 shiploads, averaging 200 per ship, had traveled. So that was about 160,000 convicts. Okay, most of them were males. In a scale of 7 out of 8, 7 out of 8 of these were males. Okay, so the voyages were long. They would take around 6 months. Many lives were lost. They were locked in iron cages below the decks in unsanitary conditions. There were more loss of life. There was more loss of lives. There were more loss of life on the voyages. Okay, so these were improved by the end of transportation. The ships were improved, so there were lesser lives being lost, because now some people volunteered just to go to Australia. Okay, so also, as I've said, there were no jails in Australia, so people lived in barracks. They worked in gangs. They were building roads, bridges, working on farms and quarries. Some were sent to work for farmers. If you behaved, you didn't have any bad record, you would be given a ticket of leave. Same as indentured laborers that you were studying about in the Indian indentured laborers that you were studying about in History 201 last semester. So the majority of the people, they remained in Australia. That's why up to this day they speak English in Australia, and many of the whites who are there, they are the descendants of those settlers who arrived during the 18th and 19th centuries. Okay, so they were hoping for a better life in Australia. Some did manage to establish this kind of better life. So they were followed by free immigrants. By 1800s, there were about 1,100 free settlers in Australia. So they could do whatever they are pleased to do to earn a living. So around 1815, the colony began to grow rapidly as immigrants arrived from Britain and Ireland. By 1830, there were about 43,500 free settlers in Australia. By 1860, there were just over 600,000 immigrants in Australia. Okay, so people they liked the place, so they were going there, inviting each other to go and live there. The colony of New South Wales was officially a penal colony from 1788 to 1823. Okay, the colony of New South Wales became another site whereby the convicts were transported to as a form of imprisonment. So most of the people there were convicts. Some were Marines and some were the wives of those mariners. So the conditions on the third ships, on the second and third fleets, transporting people into Australia. There was one person there, like Thomas Milburn, who described the second fleet of voyage to his parents in a letter. This one wrote a letter describing the conditions in, never mind the sound of an ambulance. This guy was saying we were chained two and two together and confined in the hold, during the whole course of our voyage. We were scarcely allowed a sufficient quantity of victuals to keep us alive, and scarcely any water. When any of our comrades that were chained to us died, we kept it as a secret as long as we could for the smell of the dead body, in order to get their allowance of provision. I was chained to Humphrey Davis, who died when we were about halfway, and I lay beside his corpse about a week and got his allowance, the food. So they will keep quiet if there's someone who was dead, so as to get their food parcels. Okay, if food parcel is being thrown to that person, and so this person will just take two for the other, even for the corpse. Okay. Other descriptions of the voyage including lice, which could include the parasites, open sores, chains, starvation, diseases, death, sanitation nightmare. By 1818, conditions on the ships were improved, and then the death rates was dropped. Okay. So there were also political prisoners, such as those who were rioting, the Irish nationalists. There were also South Africans, the Luddites, the Canadians, and those who committed treason. Okay, so they were also working in the private sector. They would work for certain individuals and also work for the government, as I've said, buildings, construction, and many other parts, and many other types of jobs which anyone can do if a colony is being developed. So due to building, ships, in the transportation, in the decks, similar to here in the South African case, when the English was developing a colony. Okay. They had certain rights. They did have some rights, such as food, shelter, protection from arbitrary punishment, and they could also sell their own labor during free time. So if one was free, not working on this day, on those hours, could sell their labor or work for someone else to get extra food or extra money, whatever they were being paid. Okay. So there was this also tickets of leave system. Out of all this system, as you know and you'll understand, same as in Indian indenture, there was so much abuse. There was so much abuse. They were being abused. All right. Remember there that there were Aboriginal people, the Aborigines. Those were the descendants. Those were, the original inhabitants of Australia. So there were bush rangers. The bush rangers were the runaway convicts. Those one who ran away and hide in the forest, in the bushes. So they were similar to the highwaymen in Britain. Those who were hiding in the or the outlaws in the American Old West. Those who were hiding in the bushes to commit whenever they commit their crime, they will go and hide themselves in the bushes. And also there was an island which was called Norfolk Island, Norfolk, Island. So some people were imprisoned there. The Norfolk Island, if you observe the map of Australia, there's this little island there by the east. Yes, by the east side of it. You can check the map of Australia. By the east side of it, there's just little island there. It's called Norfolk Island. So some were imprisoned there, and the conditions were not good at all there. They compared it to that. Okay, there was a person who arrived in 1800s who was called the Major Forfux. Major Forfux. Major Forfux was very brutal. He was very brutal, very aggressive towards the convicts. Okay. So there was punishment and cruelty there to an extent that the convicts, they rallied a mutiny in 1838. Those who had committed such mutiny, they were charged. 137 of them were charged. 55 of them were tried. Okay. The convicts, they begged to die. They begged to die rather than to continue to live in that in Norfolk Island, because the situation was very brutal there. The majors were very aggressive. It was not a good place to live in. Okay. So there was here, okay, let me make an example here. There was William Rayleigh, who was imprisoned for 2 years. This is what he mentions, one of the aggressive or punishments there. You will receive 100 lashes for saying, "Oh my God," while on the chain for mutiny. You will also receive hundreds of lashes for smiling while on the chain. You will receive 50 lashes for getting a light so as to smoke. 200 lashes for insolence to a soldier. 100 lashes for striking an overseer who pushed you. 8 months solitary confinement on the chain for refusing to work. 3 months for disobedience to orders. You see, it was very harsh. very, very harsh. Akushawa laphaya, ushawa ngempela, asisho isibhaxo. 100 lashes ey'nqeni, 100 lashes on your butts. So people prefer to die. So you'll also receive 3 months gaol for being a short distance from the settlement. Okay, if you are a bit away from the settlement, you'll receive lashes. 3 months, okay. 100 lashes for insolence to the sentry. 100 lashes for singing a song. 50 lashes for asking the gaoler for a chew of tobacco. 100 lashes for neglecting work. 1,000 lashes. 8 months in solitary confinement and 3 months of gaol in 2 years. Some men blinded themselves and they will be left alone because the situation was very, very harsh there. So there are a number of people who have been mentioned there were imprisoned. Okay, and also similar to the situation of executions, the reformers started to come to place. They started to argue against the transportation and its conditions. One of them was Alexander Maconochie in 1837. There was also a Molesworth Commission in 1838. Maconochie argued for a system of reform for prisoners. So in that sense, with these reformers and the commission, transportation started to come to an end in a gradual manner for three reasons. Transportation came to an end for 3 reasons: the moral and political objections by the English reformers. True reformers started to slowly come to an end. Transportation, the growth of an alternative English penitentiary system, okay, penitentiary system, incarceration system, where people were jailed. So jails were constructed, and also the Australian settlers themselves began to object this thing of transportation. Okay, so remember we also mentioned New South Wales. Transportation to this area ended in 1840, and in Norfolk Island 1853, Western Australia in 1868. It's ended in those years. So slavery and transportation, if you compare them, remember that slavery came after transportation, as many of the empires such as the French, Germany, Portugal, Britain, as they were developing their colonies in other continents. So they wanted more labor. So that's when the slavery came into existence. Okay, so slavery was also there, as we are going to discuss on our week 5 lectures. So the abolitionists saw many parallels in conditions of travel, forced labor and dehumanizing cruelty. So they compared slavery and transportation. Okay, but there were differences. Especially, let's say, convicts were not property, were not regarded as property. Convicts, They could sell their own labor, as I was saying. In your free hours, you could sell your own labor. It was only magistrates who could legally punish servants. The sentences once served, people were given land and children were born free. Okay, so there were differences from slavery. So there were differences when you compare it to slavery. Women and gender in the colony. Remember I said there were about 160,000 people who were transported between 1788 and 1852. So there were only about 24,000 women. It's not even half. It's not even half. More than 80% of women were sent out, were convicted of thefts. Women, so they were doing this smaller types of crimes in England, such as thefts, and then they were sent out to Australia. Okay. Some of them who were working as prostitutes, they were also sent there. And also the work that women did there was that they were breeding stock, and also to prevent homosexuality if they are only men, to keep men under control. You know, women are very powerful. When there's a woman around, it differs when they are only men. Okay. And also there were situations of marriage and concubinage. There was also prostitution. There was also female factories. Men made up of over 70% of the population of the colony. The British government initiated a scheme to bring women to Australia. 2,700 young women were brought to Australia by the London Immigration Committee between August 1833 and February 1837. 14 ships of women made the journey from London to Ireland, destined for Sydney, Hobart, and Launceston. Launceston. Yeah, okay. Although the British government paid for the women to find accommodation or work, they paid for them. So women are also there. That's why in a boxing ring, to those who are there, I know some of you are boxers. Boxing is a nice sport. I grew up playing boxing. That's why in boxing, in the middle of the rounds, when it's round 2, while you are still sitting in your corners, there will be a woman gallivanting around with a board written round 2. And those women, they usually wear short skirts, just to destabilize your mind, so that you come back to your senses, that it's a sport. It's not a real fight, as in an actual fight where someone has to die, just to reassure your mind that we are in a sports session. So a woman will go around in the middle of the rounds, just to, even when the women are passing by, you just have to gaze a bit. Men become softer when there are women around. It's a natural instinct. Okay. So by the mid 19th century, in the 1850s, so opinion was widely against transportation. So the bloody code has ended, and it seems wrong to send convicts on a free passage to build a new life in Australia when others had to pay to go. So also removing criminals did not reduce crime rates in England. People continued with their crime and criminality activities. The prisons were considered a better method of punishing and or reforming criminals. Also, ironically, Australians began to object strongly to their country being used as a dumping ground for Britain's criminals. So transportation ended in 1857 and slavery came into the picture. All right, thank you very much. This is the end of our transportation lesson.